This is Alex. Alex is 20 years old and homeless. No problem, he is very young. He can work somewhere and buy a house, right? Well, okay, maybe he can move into a rental home. The global housing crisis. We have been hearing these words very often lately. This situation is quite normal because in the 1980s, a couple working average jobs could own a decent house after working for 3.5 years with their average salaries. Today, they need to work for about 6 years, especially since large workplaces, factories, and the economy have concentrated more in major cities like New York, London, Barcelona, and Istanbul. And because people have to work there, a large part of the population had to move to housing near these workplaces or to areas on the city fringes where transportation is limited, or even to coffin homes. In other words, sheltering in big cities has become much harder. So, how did such a problem arise all over the world? In this video, I will explain how housing turned into a financial investment tool and why house prices have increased so much, with its causes and consequences. I am Yorula. Let's begin. Section 1. Wrong place, wrong house. There is a simple rule in economics. Supply must meet demand. However, in the housing market, the gap between supply and demand has widened not only numerically but also qualitatively. When you look at the total number of houses in the world, there are actually enough roof for the population. However, these houses are not in the places where people are forced to live. Star cities. In the last 20 years, the world economy has gathered around a few major star cities: London, New York, Istanbul, Berlin, San Francisco. Because job opportunities, education, and health services are piled into these centers, everyone wants to live there. The location problem. Massive empty housing estates in China, or very cheap, free houses in rural Europe, prove the location problem of the crisis. If there is no place for people to work, it doesn't matter if the house is cheap. Concentrated increases. According to OECD housing reports, the fastest increases in housing prices in developed countries are in finance and technology centers that cover only 1 to 2% of the total land area. There's also the issue of the wrong house. The types of houses built do not match what the public wants. Why? Are contractors stupid? No. For contractors, the profit margin for building social housing or small economic apartments is very low. Instead of building 10 cheap apartments on the same land, building 3 ultra-luxury residences is financially more attractive. This creates a housing surplus that appeals only to the rich, while leaving the middle and lower income groups homeless. There is a big gap in urban planning. On one side, there are massive high-rise skyscrapers, and on the other, very expensive detached houses. The middle-scale buildings, low-rise apartments with gardens, row houses, duplexes that people need most cannot be built due to zoning laws. Furthermore, unfortunately, people have started to become lonely. I will explain this in another video. The size of houses cannot adapt to the changing family structure. The number of single-person households in the world is breaking records. However, a large part of the existing housing stock consists of traditional 3+1 or 4+1 family homes. At the same time, there is inefficient use, under-occupation. In many Western countries, for example UK and USA, the elderly population continues to live in huge houses even though their children have left home. Young families, on the other hand, are squeezed into tiny apartments. The housing stock cannot be distributed efficiently. Section 2. Housing as an investment tool. The 2008 global financial crisis, mortgage crisis, created a massive rupture in the housing market. When millions of people lost their homes and banks seized them, vulture funds stepped in. Giant asset management companies like Blackstone bought tens of thousands of homes in packages at very cheap prices. These companies, instead of selling the houses, turned them into massive rental portfolios. While the landlord-tenant relationship used to be between two individuals, there are now anonymous corporations determining rent with billion-dollar algorithms. The new gold. When uncertainty increases in the global economy, wars, inflation, pandemic, large investors look for a tangible asset to protect their money. Since housing is an asset that both gains value and provides monthly cash flow, it has become the new gold. Ghost lights. This is the reason why the lights of many luxury apartments in cities like London, Vancouver, or Istanbul do not turn on. It is not important for someone to live inside the house. It is enough for the house to sit on the balance sheet as an asset. This artificially lowers the available housing supply in the market. Additionally, the housing market has been integrated with the stock market. Today, a person can become a partner in the rent of thousands of houses by buying shares from a real estate investment trust, REIT, without ever seeing a house. This has increased the amount of money entering the housing market by trillions of dollars. When there is this much money in the market, prices have started to compete with the size of global capital rather than the salaries of real people. The low interest rate policy implemented for years by central banks, especially the Fed and ECB, fueled this financialization. Giant funds borrowed billions of dollars at very low interest rates and hoarded housing with this money. It became impossible for an individual citizen to compete with this massive capital power and buy a house. Consequence: housing prices are no longer determined by the earnings of the people living in that city, but by the profit rate expected by global investors. Financial institutions aggressively increase rents for profit maximization. This leads to low-income people being driven out of their neighborhoods. Section 3. The physical and bureaucratic wall of construction. Everywhere in the world, the answer to the question, why don't we build more houses, is hidden in three major obstacles: cost, people, and bureaucracy. Costs. Construction costs have increased between 50% and 100% in some countries, compared to the pre-pandemic period. Steel, cement, lumber, and glass prices peaked with global supply chain disruptions and energy crisis, especially energy costs after the Russia-Ukraine war. 2. Climate standards. As of 2026, it is becoming mandatory for buildings to be carbon neutral or comply with energy efficiency standards as part of the fight against the climate crisis. While this is great for the environment, it adds an extra 15-20% burden to construction costs. 3. Labor shortage. On top of these, the number of personnel working in construction has decreased. Even in the world's most developed countries, people to work on construction sites cannot be found. Experienced masters, plumbers, electricians, masons are retiring. The new generation prefers the service sector or digital jobs instead of physically demanding construction work. This causes labor, wages, and therefore house prices to skyrocket. McKinsey's construction sector reports emphasize that the sector is the only major one that has remained stagnant in terms of productivity for the last 50 years, has failed to digitalize, and therefore cannot keep up with demand. NIMBY and red tape. Even if there is a place to build a house in cities, the people who own or live near that place do not allow new construction. In literature, this is called NIMBY, not in my backyard. Existing homeowners can stop constructions for years through legal processes, arguing that new high-rise buildings will block their sun, increase traffic, or ruin the character of the area. In many cities, especially in the US and Europe, there are laws that only allow the construction of single-family detached houses. Apartment projects that would increase density hit legal barriers. This leads to the inefficient use of limited land. Furthermore, the time it takes for a housing project to go from dream to turnkey has doubled in the last 10 years. Due to environmental impact assessments, municipal permits, and objection periods. The construction of a building can take an average of 5 to 7 years. While supply moves this slowly, demand continues to increase every day. On top of this physical supply issue, the touristification of the existing housing stock is added. In cities like Barcelona, Lisbon, Istanbul, and Rome, tens of thousands of houses are rented daily to tourists, rather than to those living in the city. The people of Barcelona, in particular, suffer greatly from this. When housing in the most livable centers of the city is withdrawn from the market, local people are forced to move to much more distant and difficult to access areas of the city. This creates the situation we call spatial injustice. Part 4. How can we solve this? The Japan model. Although house prices are increasing worldwide, the only country where prices have decreased is Japan. How do they achieve this? There is no housing crisis in Japan because the Japanese built the system on the logic that a house is not a profit-making investment, but a commodity that is lived in and ages. Antiques versus cars. In the rest of the world, a house is an antique that gains value over time. In Japan, a house is like a car. Its value starts to decrease the moment you take it out the door. Economic life. According to the Japanese tax system, the economic life of a house is approximately 22 to 30 years. At the end of this period, the market value of the building mathematically drops to zero. Since the value of the house does not increase, no one hoards houses from the market saying, "Let me buy a house and sell it for double in 10 years." When speculation is eliminated, prices are shaped only according to people's need for shelter. Inheritance tax. It is very difficult to hold a property for generations in Japan. Inheritance tax rates can go up to 55%. If you have a very valuable piece of land left from your grandfather, you must either divide and sell the land or immediately build a building that will generate income, meaning people will live there to pay that tax. This system prevents the most valuable lands of the city from being kept empty or hoarded by wealthy families or funds. Land constantly changes hands and remains open to production. Zoning laws. In Western metropolises London, New York, Istanbul, you struggle with years of bureaucracy and neighbor objections to build a new building. Japan removed this obstacle in the 1990s. Zoning permits are not in the hands of local municipalities or neighborhood groups. The rules are national. If you have land and comply with the standards, your neighbor cannot stop you by saying you are blocking the view. Supply and transport. About 100,000 new housing units are built in Tokyo every year. The moment demand increases, supply responds immediately. Prices always remain in balance because of this. In rural areas, millions of houses stand empty. Because young people flock to centers like Tokyo, houses in the countryside are transferred for free or for very symbolic fees. The Shinkansen effect. Japan's legendary high-speed train network eliminates the concept of distance. A Japanese person escaping high prices in the city center can live in a distant but affordable house and reach work quickly. Conclusion. In summary, if we can take Japan as an example, we can solve this problem. However, I do not think they will adopt such a solution because the Japanese state consists of respectful people who think of their public and have work discipline, but other large nation states generally work for the rich. Therefore, my view is that this problem will continue to grow day by day. While some stay in coffin-shaped rooms where they cannot even stand up, others buy and hold houses so beautiful they could only be seen in movies for investment purposes, and those houses often sit completely empty for years without even finding a tenant. To be honest, one of the greatest damages of capitalism is taking away the right to shelter, which is one of the most basic needs of human beings. Because it is more profitable, contractors will build more houses for the rich will buy more, house prices in the market will inflate artificially, and the poor will become more dependent on landlords by paying more rent. and governments will ignore this situation with the bribes they receive from the rich. I hope we can all own houses one day that we can fill with beautiful memories. Until then, I hope to see you again.